Hello, and welcome to the Media Center's 8th Local Hero Award Series, in which we showcase 6 people from the Mid-Peninsula for outstanding achievement or contributions to the community. We solicited nominations and were particularly looking for the unsung heroes. Each winner is an inspiration, and each has a great story to tell. At the age of 15, Sabrina Watts was a troubled teen, convicted of battery and grand theft auto. Already on probation and in and out of juvenile hall, she faced doing time or doing rehab. She chose rehab. Now, 16 years later, she is the creator and director of a really innovative program, Project One Love, that pairs troubled young people with shelter dogs. It provides training, rehab, and therapy for both the dogs and the kids. Sabrina, thank you for coming, and I want to welcome our special guest that you've brought here, Freya. We won't be talking to her, but we'll be talking about her a little later. However, I'd like to start with your story and how it began when you went to rehab. What were the circumstances that led you to that?
Well, I was on probation, and ultimately I just kept getting dirty pee tests, but I was...
Dirty pee, you mean urine tests?
Yes.
Yeah, you're right.
And I was in and out for some bad behavior. My house was a little crazy, so me and my mom were fighting, and then I'd go in for fighting with her.
And what happened? What was the one that pushed it over the edge?
It was a dirty urine sample, and then I took her car, went joyriding, and got caught.
So you had a choice?
Yeah.
And how did you go about making that choice?
Well, at that point, I knew that my life was very crazy at home, and I was so concerned about my mom and her addiction and trying to keep things okay at home that it was either continue to live like that, and who knows what that was going to bring me, or go to rehab and get some skills to take care of myself and figure out life on my own.
So you went to rehab. How long were you in rehab?
13 and a half months.
I'd like to get an idea of how you changed before and after going to rehab. So give me a couple of snapshots, if you will. Sabrina before, Sabrina afterward.
I was very angry, and I would have outbursts before. And I think the biggest thing was I always saw myself as less of a victim when I left, which allowed me to have more power in my life. So it was taking more responsibility for my actions, even though my environment wasn't the best. So I still had to look at myself and see where I was not being a good person or not acting appropriately in my life, and the anger. So I was still angry after, but I had better tools to deal with it.
It's funny because you don't strike me now as angry at all. So you've obviously come quite a ways.
Thanks.
What was the hardest part of rehab for you?
Being away from my dog, for sure, and my mom, because I was worried about her. But she was in rehab too, shortly after, so I kind of knew where she was. And just not knowing where I was going to go after and what life was going to be like, and knowing I couldn't have the same friends. So everything was kind of in the air.
A lot of people don't succeed in rehab. You did. To what do you attribute that?
I really think that the adults that made a difference in my life while I was there, believing in me, helped me trust in myself more. And that's really kind of what it came down to, is having faith in myself that I just needed to, and blind faith, that I just needed to keep doing the right thing and put one foot in front of the other, and things will get better, and I'll get to where I'm trying to go.
Uh-oh, looks like we've just lost her. She's taking a nap here, but she's still here. She's obviously comfortable. I gathered that you also had a counselor or somebody in rehab that made a concession to you that was absolutely key. Tell me about that.
When I had gone in 6 weeks later, my mom had gone in to an adult facility rehab too, and so my dog went to the ranch, and then she ended up at the shelter, and he let me get her and bring her back there to Daytop, which is now
Daytop
OCG.
is the name of the rehab.
Yes, it's now OCG since 2008, but when I was there, it was Daytop. And so we had a dog already on the facility, on property. We had a dog, and he just, for whatever reason, he knew that that's really all I wanted and kind of needed. And he let the maintenance guy take me down to the SF shelter and go and pick her up and bring her back.
So you had your own dog in rehab with you. Mm-hmm. How much difference do you think that made to your recovery?
I think that made the difference. Because I felt hopeless when they told me she was in the shelter. You know, I felt like my other half was there, and I just couldn't even imagine what would happen to her not having my life with her. So when they allowed me to bring her there, that was it. That was the only thing I cared about, and it just gave me, all the hope in the world, because somebody actually listened to me and believed that I knew what I needed, and then allowed me to have what I needed, and that's really what I needed.
When you were there, what did you learn? You made a comment about that I thought was interesting about understanding and being understood, that you came to see those differently when you were in rehab. Tell me about that.
Well, the actual unwritten philosophy that we learn is it's better to understand than to be understood. And my peers helped me learn that first, because, we tend to just have reactions on people for whatever they're doing. But if we can take a step back and see where they're coming from and why they're having the reaction they are, or why they're acting the way they are, we are able to better help them or change the outcome of the situation, because we can go about it in a different manner at that point. So, you can yell at somebody what your point is all day long, and they're not going to hear you unless you figure out what's going to connect with them, for them to be able to get on the same level you are, and even then see your point, possibly.
Now, you've also said that rehab helped you to see the walls. What does that mean?
Walls are what we put up in front of us to keep ourselves safe. So anger, obviously, is a wall of, hurt and sadness and whatever else. And so that's probably the biggest wall that I can see within people. But you also see it with animals at the shelter. So there's a parallel there.
This applies to so much more than just people in rehab, obviously.
Yeah.
And to just animals. It kind of applies to everybody.
Everybody, for sure.
So you have your dog, and you're obviously attached to your dog for a long time. Have you always had a thing with animals? A closeness with them?
Yeah. From when I was 4 and I rescued a cat with cheese, even though my stepdad was allergic, I made sure that cat got in our house, and we had an animal in the house.
Any other experiences? I think you mentioned something about a hamster that sounded kind of cool.
Oh yeah, my 4th grade teacher, she had class animals. We had snake, a hamster, some fish, and the hamster was going to have babies, and I wanted one. And she said, you can only have one if you get on the honor roll. And at that point, I think my grades were okay, but not, the best. And I got on the honor roll to get that hamster, and I stayed on until high school.
Wow.
So it gave me motivation, and I appreciated it that much more because I had to work hard to get the animal.
Definitely a message out there for parents.
Yeah.
I'd like to move on to what you're doing now. Quite a leap from then to now, but in a lot of ways, the seeds were already there. What is your nonprofit, and why did you create it?
My nonprofit is Project One Love, and what we do is we pair up at-risk youth and shelter dogs for training. And I created it partly because what the experience gave for me in rehab, and what I've seen since we started running pilot programs in 2009 with the kids being able to work with a rescue dog and take an animal that's scared and, you know, not okay on leash yet and not even okay being touched and held, and then working with them and getting them to a point where they see a person and they go up to the person and they wag their tail and they wag their body. Wow. And they can sit on command, and they gain so much confidence in being able to see the work that they're able to do, and immediately you can see the empathy for the animal when the child's working with the animal.
So you came out of a horrible situation and not only got through rehab, but actually used it to build something and brought together what I think to some people would seem like two unlikely, you know, kids in rehab and pets.
Yeah.
But do you see, I mean, you've got the rescued pets and you've got the rescued kids, essentially. What parallels do you see there?
They are both untrusting of the world. So you can walk into the rehab and try to have a conversation with a kid that's shutting you out and not really responding to you, and that you can see is angry. And you can walk into the kennels and, you know, especially if the animal's just been rescued from another shelter, they're in the back, they're growling, they're snapping, they're stress whining, they don't want you to come near them. And so they both kind of start out the same. And each person and animal obviously has a different approach that's going to work for them. But when you're able to see them change and trust, then you're able to start seeing them flourish. And that's the reward, is when you start to see them
trust.
Be alive, and trust and be open.
It sounds like trust is like absolutely key, because without it you can't proceed. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
What about that process of healing? Do you see parallels that begin with trust and just that whole kind of road?
Yes, because if they're truly starting to trust somebody, whether it's animal or kid, you start to see the changes be long-lasting in them, and they don't just revert back, or you can pull them out of their maybe negative behaviors or default behaviors, I should say. You can pull them out more quickly and get them to a place where they're either feeling more comfortable and behaving better.
Is there a danger or maybe a benefit, you tell me, to taking a scared, not trusting kid and a scared, not trusting animal and putting them together?
There's a huge benefit, I think, more than there being a danger, for sure. Because if it's done right and it's more on a one-on-one basis, or, you know, there's still enough adults there to help facilitate and make sure that it's safe for the animal and safe for the child, the rest just happens.
In other words, they connect around that, you think, kind of, that lack of trust?
Absolutely. Absolutely, because the kids immediately have empathy for the dogs and they want to fix it. And when they are able to get a positive response from the dog, even if it's kissing or laying with them calmly, or the shaking stops, or they're able to finally get a sit from a dog that just wouldn't do anything before, they start to open up.
Do you think that works the other way? Do you think the dog senses a vulnerability in the humans as well?
Yeah, I think so.
And is there something that dogs can do for these kids that humans just can't do? And if so, what?
You see it in that moment that I just described. Sometimes people just can't do that to kids. They've had so much distrust with adults in their lives that may take a little bit more, but the animal is almost key for certainly us as coaches to get the trust of the kid. Because when we're telling them this is what we need to do and this is how we need to approach the dog, and then they do that and then they're able to connect with the animal, they trust what's coming out of our mouth that much more. And then we have a wider door that's open for us to then reach out to the child.
You must nevertheless get some very angry and therefore tough characters who come in. What's it like watching them? Tell me what you see when you see a really tough character and a helpless puppy. What happens?
usually the tough character, and it's both male and female. But for me, when it's male, they get silly. They get silly with the dogs, and that's always the most amusing and heartwarming at the same time thing to see, is to see somebody that's hard and won't really give you eye contact, and then they start getting silly and they get the little kid voice with the dog.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Tell me about, if you have, maybe one particularly heartening moment that you remember. I think you told me about a girl who worked with a really frightened dog. Tell me about that again. It was a girl who had a really frightened dog, and then she ended up sleeping with it or something like that.
Oh yeah, Jamila. We had a couple dogs that we couldn't really do leash work with them because they were so frightened they would start to alligator roll. And so we weren't going to even try to make them sit yet, because just handling them, they would piddle. They would urinate a little bit. And so they were really shaky, and so what I had the girls do was sit down on the wall and just hold the dogs. And the dogs wouldn't even take treats at first. And this one little dog, Kylie, she picked up and she just kind of walked into her bedroom. She was laying down with the dog in the bed and stroking the dog. And that dog actually got adopted 2 weeks later. And she was able to start to crawl around, not pee, come to somebody with some trust, and actually start to take food. So you saw immediate results. It took a couple hours, but
wow. Yeah. Now, you are from a troubled family, but you weren't from a troubled community, and yet you've chosen to work in East Palo Alto, which is outside of your previous comfort zone.
Yeah.
Why did you choose to work there?
I had it as one of my beats when I was a humane officer. So I started working there, and the city just kind of opened my eyes to more of the world and how things were ran, and I just could see the big need there, and I could see the need with children. I also had a friend that was a police officer that was killed while I was there, and his vision was to make things better for the kids. And when he died, his stepdad had said something at the funeral about, how to carry on somebody's legacy was to do right by them. And since he was trying to work with the kids and make this community a better place, it was to make the community a better place for the kids.
Right.
So that had made a big imprint on me.
And you were a humane officer, and you have police training, you have a lot of other things under your belt at this time. But you did tell me a story I'd like you to reiterate about an education that you got, where you had a confrontation with an East Palo Alto resident who was angry. Tell me about that.
I was investigating a house that we didn't really have an exact address for, but it was for dogs barking and for kind of unsanitary conditions. And I thought it was the next door neighbor's house. And it was a winter evening, about 6 o'clock, so I had my flashlight and I was making sure there's no dogs in the yard. And this man came out and he was yelling at me about how we would lock up their people and say we rape their women and all kinds of other nasty things. And
so it was a racial tension.
It was a racial thing, yeah. And I kind of gave him a couple smart remarks back, like humane officers do that. And then what ended up happening was it was really supposed to be for his house. So once I figured that out and that I was at the wrong house, I had police back up with me to go to talk to him about his dogs. And I had given him a fix-it ticket for just getting his dog shots. And he was very angry when I was doing that too, saying I was abusing my authority and that I was loving it. And when I had started working in East Palo Alto, I had started going to church there just so I could get a feel for the community a little better. So that Sunday after church, I drove over to his house and I walked out and he was outside. And I just had a conversation with him and I told him, look, like the way you came at me is really what the problem is,
Wow.
because you don't know me and you don't know what my intentions are, and I don't make this little amount of money, you know, having to wear a bulletproof vest and work in this town because I love to abuse my authority. Like, I'm here for the animals, and, you know, and so I explained that about him, and then I explained that the anger and that the racial things that he was saying was the exact kind of attitude that would keep a wall between people and not let them connect, right? And then for whatever reason, it totally opened up. He said, you know, I've never had anybody come at me like that, and what you're saying is actually right. And so we were able to have a good conversation after that. And I had some more work to do on that street, and he ended up being an ally for me, and kind of looked out for me, and I'd left some equipment, and he got it back from some kids. And
that's a great story.
I will never forget that, or him, and the conversation that came from that.
What do you most want people to know about what you do that maybe they misunderstand?
I think people need to value children in all neighborhoods, and that given the right amount of support and structure and love, these kids can flourish and become amazing people and amazing productive members of any society. And it doesn't really matter where you start, but that we need to make sure that we get all kids the resources that they need, because they can be born into any situation. It's not their fault, but if they have the extra support, they can certainly come out of it a lot better than if we forget that they're there.
And at the end of the day, what's the reward for you?
Being able, can I give you an example?
Yep.
There's a group of sisters that we've been working with since 2009 East Palo Alto, and they finally got a dog about a year and a half ago. They've trained the dog all by themselves to sit, comes off leash, all over the place, because they take it all over the place off leash. They taught her to be quiet, and they taught her how to walk on a leash nice, and that was all from working with us the last few years.
Nice. Yeah.
So they are so proud of themselves, and they talk about maybe possibly being a dog trainer. So just being able to see what they've gotten out of it, and then that they were able to apply it in their life, and I wasn't even around to help them. So they did that all on their own. So to see how proud they are of themselves, and I know how far that's going to stretch within them.
Yeah, good. Well, it's a remarkable program. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Maybe we'll have to wake up Freya here or not.
Baby.
Oh, there we go. Okay, I don't know if we'll catch a shot of her, but we'll have plenty of shots of her. Anyway, thank you so much for coming. Congratulations on the award. And thank you to our wonderful crew here, and thank you all for watching. Do you know someone who has overcome significant hardship and has an inspiring story to tell? Someone who has sacrificed or given over and above to the community and deserves some recognition? If so, please contact us with your nomination for next year's Local Hero Awards. To find out more about our local heroes and to watch interviews with all the winners, visit our website, midpenmedia.org. At the Mid-Peninsula Community Media Center, you can make your own videos and television programs and take classes in all aspects of media production. You can also hire our professional services team. To find out more about that, go to mcproservices.com. Congratulations to all our winners, and thank you for watching.